Welcome back to Wolf Guitars and Gear. Today we're going to be talking about some reasons why you might want to consider buying a Les Paul. So let's go back to the early 1940s. One of the most popular recording artists of the time was named Les Paul. And he's actually responsible for a lot of innovations in music. Not only the guitar that bears his name, but also multi-track recording. And he was also just known as a virtuoso on the guitar at the time. He was one of the most popular recording artists of his day. And he had come to Gibson in the early 1940s asking for a solid body guitar because he thought it would eliminate the feedback that he was experiencing with the semi-hollows that were popular at the time. Around the same time, Fender separately was developing the Telecaster from the various Esquire models and everything. That was all kind of happening at the same time. But then, right about 1952 is when they brought out the first Les Pauls. And it looks something like this. They had two P90 pickups, and this particular one is an Epiphone that I had picked up, and somebody put a Bigsby on it, so maybe not technically correct, but still a pretty fair representation of what the guitars were at that point. Standard construction is what you would still expect now, with a solid mahogany body with a solid maple cap on top, single cutaway, two pickups, four knobs, a volume for each pickup and a tone for each pickup, three-way toggle switch, trapezoid inlays. Very typical of what you see. And then in the later 50s, around 57, Seth Lover, who was working for Gibson, developed what they referred to as humbucking pickups. And again, there are so many innovations happening with electric guitar at that point. Gretsch was developing a Filtertron at the same time, and may have actually been developed before Seth Lover developed his humbucking pickups that we all are familiar with. However, Seth Lover was the first one to get his patent application in, and so thus his pickups were commonly referred to as PAFs, or patent applied for, and that is what we commonly see and what most people would associate with the Les Paul that they're familiar with. The dual coil design that cancels out the hum, equaling a warmer, richer tone. And with that, ushered in a whole new era, because these didn't sound like anything else like was on the market before. They had much higher output, and they had a different mid-range section that seemed to just be different than the typical single coils that were popular up to that point. Also in 57, 58, 59 is when they began doing what they referred to as the bursts. Now, this is just a typical cherry burst again, just an Epiphone. This is the same guitar I've had for many, many years. But the actual bursts from 58 are some of the most sought after guitars on the planet today. They'll go for insane sums of money, the least of which would be $50,000 on up. And they just are incredible. Would it be a bucket list item? Certainly. Would I ever have a need for a $50,000 guitar? No, I can't justify that kind of a cost, but it would be amazing to be able to play one at some point. I will say that. So that takes me to my own personal experience with Les Pauls. Now, like many people, I started off on a Strat, and there's so many famous Strat players out there: Jimi Hendrix, Eric Clapton, Stevie Ray Vaughan, and it's a fine instrument. But I'm going to be honest with you, I am not much of a Strat fan personally. It just is hard for me to get what I want out of the guitar. I do have it on hand because every once in a while you have to have it, but for most of my sounds, I have found, for me personally, that it's better for me to have two pickups instead of 3. So right about this point in the discussion, I always wind up running into this Strat owner. He always says, "Yeah, but my Strat has 3 pickups and it's got a 5-way switch, therefore it's more versatile than your 2 pickup, 3 position, humbucker equipped Les Paul." To which I say, bull honky, because what the Les Paul has that the Strat does not have is an individual volume and tone for each pickup. Therefore, when you're in the middle position on the Les Paul, you can roll either volume independently up or down to get a mix and a blend of each, giving you infinitely more variation than you can with 2 pickup switches positions. In addition to that, you can also have one pickup dark, one pickup bright, with the tones adjusted differently. That's how Eric Clapton achieved the woman tone that he was famous for during his Cream days. So this idea that somehow a Les Paul is less versatile than a Strat is just absolutely ridiculous on its face, and you always are going to wind up looking like this guy. Don't be that good. This Les Paul setup it just really works for me. Having 2 pickups, one that's warm and rich in the neck, and one that's bright with lots of output in the bridge. It just works. Same thing with a Telly. That's why I prefer a Telly over a Strat, is what I've discovered. And I think that's really a good thing for all players to do, is to play a variety of guitars until they begin to distinguish those factors for themselves of what really works for them. How can you get the sound that you want? And I think another part of that too, again, comes down to the pickups. As you can see, I have both the PAF version and I have the P90 version. I love both of them, and both of them offer something different than what you find in a Strat. To offer a food analogy, I would say that a Strat single coil to me is like vanilla ice cream. It's good. It's sweet. It's very malleable in the fact that it goes with everything. You can put all sorts of, you can put chocolate sauce on it, you can put strawberry sauce, you can put all sorts of toppings on it, and it's not going to mess with what it is. It's just a vanilla, it's a base for anything. And that's, I think, why so many players have found a good use for that. It's not necessarily a negative thing, but to me it also is very plain and very thin sounding is really my main complaint with the Strat, is that I have a very hard time getting it to sound as thick as I want. That is not an issue with the Les Paul. From the very first time that I went into a store and plugged in a Les Paul, which would have been probably 97, 98. I was a college student, and I just went and plugged one in, and as I said, I'd been playing a Strat up to that point, and as soon as I plugged it in, I was blown away at the amount of sustain. And I knew from that second I had to have one. And at the time I was working a landscaping job, and I saved up a couple paychecks, and I went and I bought this guitar right here in about 98, I think it was, 98, 99, something like that. And this guitar has been with me ever since, and it's still my #1 guitar. Like I said, the difference with a humbucker, as opposed to, you remember I described the Strat pickups as vanilla. These are like a rich chocolate. They really are something sweet, something special and rich and thick all on their own. And they can go well with other things, but they do react differently as well. But it also is fine just by itself, and I think that's the main difference. I think that single coil players and humbucker players are just two different animals, because you have to EQ your amps so differently. You have to run your gain structure a little differently, because they do react different in each of those situations. So you're going to want to make sure that these are going to have more mids and more low end. They'll have highs, but not as much. It's not as harsh and brittle as say a Telecaster or anything of that nature, where it's very tinny almost on the high end, and you have to kind of tame that by taking some of the highs off. Then you have to push all your mids on a Strat to get any kind of meat out of it to where it's usable. With this, you don't have that problem whatsoever. It will be thick, it'll be rich, it'll cut through the band mix no problem. And for me, that's always been a very good thing. It's been very reliable. Like I said, I've had this guitar for 20 plus years. We've been all around the nation, played hundreds of shows with this. I still can't put it down. I think that says everything I need to say right there. That after 20 years, I still can't put this guitar down. I still love it. And yeah, as I mentioned, would I love to have a 58? Absolutely. But that's not stopping me from enjoying even what some would consider a budget model with having an Epiphone here or an Epiphone with my gold top. Both of them are fantastic guitars, and they play well. They sound fantastic. I would advise everyone to go out and play a Les Paul at the very least, even if you don't like it. I think you need to play it a few times. And it's one thing to play it in the store, but it's another to play it in a band setting. And I think that once you do that, I think you'll really see why it's been a favorite for players like Joe Perry, and for obviously Les Paul himself, and other players like Jimmy Page, Peter Green, Slash, a whole slew of people that are famous for playing Les Pauls. They're fantastic instruments. Zakk Wylde be another one. I mean, they're great. So hope you learned something, just some points to consider. Get in the comments and tell me what you think. What's your favorite Les Paul, whether it's an Epiphone, a Gibson, or maybe some other knockoff model, maybe one of the lawsuit era guitars. So hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time here on Wolf Guitars and Gear.